HOA poisoned my lake to prevent me from fishing. Didn't know their water supply depends on it. Part 1. The calm before the poison. My name's Ava Morgan, and I've lived in Dallas, Texas, my whole life. I wasn't born into money, but I worked my way up. Started as a waitress, saved every penny, and after 20 years of sweat, I bought myself a little slice of heaven. 10 acres, with a natural lake shimmering right behind my home. That lake wasn't just water to me. It was peace. It was mine. Every morning, I'd walk down barefoot to the dock, coffee in hand, and toss my line into the still water. I didn't even care if I caught anything. Just the sound of the wind through the cypress trees and the way the sun hit the lake. It was enough to make me feel alive. But peace doesn't last long when there's an HOA involved. The HOA from California when a group of developers from Los Angeles, California, came to Texas talking about modern lakeside community expansions. I should have known trouble was coming. They were slick. The kind of people who wear $1,000 shoes to a barbecue. They bought out the lots surrounding my land and formed a homeowners association. Lake Haven, HOA. Even though I wasn't a part of their development, my land was older, private, and excluded from their jurisdiction. But they didn't like that. You see, their million-dollar homes were selling with the promise of lake access. Problem was, the lake was mine. I owned it, and that drove them crazy. Their president, Karen Doyle, was a former real estate executive from Los Angeles, always dressed in pastel suits and sunglasses, big enough to hide her eyes. She talked like she was still in Beverly Hills. Condescending, plastic, and power-hungry. From the start, she treated me like an obstacle, not a neighbor. The harassment begins. It started small. Anonymous complaints about my unkept property. Fines showing up in my mailbox, even though I wasn't under their HOA. Then one morning, I found a sign nailed to my fence. Private property under HOA review. No fishing allowed. I ripped it down so hard I got a splinter in my palm. I stormed down to their little glass office by the clubhouse. Karen was sitting inside, sipping iced coffee like she owned the sun. "You people have no authority over me," I said, slamming the fake violation notice on her desk. She smiled. "Oh, Ava, we're just trying to maintain community standards. That lake connects to our water features. It affects all of us. That lake is mine," I snapped. "Bought, paid for, deed recorded in my name." Her smile didn't fade. "You'll find that community harmony requires cooperation. You might want to adapt before it gets complicated." Complicated. That word stuck with me. The first signs of poison weeks passed. I ignored them. Went back to my morning fishing. But one day I noticed something strange. The water looked dull. The reflection wasn't crisp anymore. It shimmered with a faint oily film. Then came the smell, like rotten eggs mixed with metal. My cat, Willow, drank from the edge of the lake that night. By morning, she was gone. I buried her under the old pecan tree behind the barn. And that's when I knew. This wasn't nature. This was sabotage. I took a water sample and sent it to a lab in Dallas. The results came back clear. High concentrations of pesticides and industrial chemicals, not naturally occurring. Someone had poisoned my lake. The rage boils over. I drove straight to the HOA office again. Karen was there with her board. 2 smug men from California. One named Brad, the other Tyler. I slapped the lab report on the table. "You did this. You poisoned my lake." Brad laughed. "Lady, you think we'd waste money on your puddle?" Karen leaned back, smirking. "Ava, if you can't prove anything, I suggest you calm down before this becomes defamation. I felt my heart pounding so hard I could barely speak. You think you can walk into Texas, destroy what's mine, and threaten me? She stood, towering over me in her pink designer suit. I think you should learn how things work in a managed community. Managed. That's what they called control. The waterboard discovery. I wasn't the kind of woman to let things slide. That night, I started digging. I spent hours combing through county records, property surveys, and water permits. And that's when I found it, a connection that changed everything. Turns out, the HOA's brand new luxury homes weren't connected to the city's main water supply. They were drawing water through an underground aquifer, one that originated beneath my lake, the same lake they had just poisoned. I sat there staring at the maps, hands trembling, their entire subdivision. Every lawn, every shower, every sprinkler depended on my water, and they had no idea. I smiled for the first time in weeks. The plan for revenge. I didn't go to the police. Not yet. No, I was going to let karma flow naturally. Or rather, stop flowing. I met with a water rights attorney in downtown Dallas. He confirmed it. The HOA's water system was privately managed and connected through easement pipes that ran beneath my property line. Legally, he said, you can shut that flow off if it's contaminating your land. That was all I needed to hear. I waited. I wanted them to feel comfortable, to think they'd gotten away with it. I even smiled and waved when Karen drove past in her silver Mercedes, pretending everything was fine. But inside, I was burning. The day the lake died one morning, the entire lake turned green, like sludge. Dead fish floated to the surface. The stench was unbearable. They didn't even try to hide it this time. The HOA maintenance crew had been seen dumping barrels by the shoreline the night before. That was it. I called the EPA, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, and a private environmental inspector. Within 2 days, they confirmed it. The water was toxic. A mix of herbicides, nitrates, and industrial runoff. And yet, somehow, the HOA blamed me. They sent letters claiming I had mismanaged private property affecting community health. They even posted about me online, calling me unstable, aggressive, and uncooperative. I could feel the fury crawl up my spine. They thought they'd broken me. They thought I'd give up. But they didn't know that every faucet in their perfect $1 million homes was drinking from my poisoned water. The calm before the cut. I waited for the right day. A dry, hot afternoon in early August. The Texas heat was brutal, and lawns across the community were already drying out. I walked down to the old utility hatch near the back of my property, the one I'd discovered connected to their water intake line. It was time. I placed my hand on the rusted valve, twisted it slowly until I heard the suction fade, the sound of pressure dying out somewhere across the lake. Sprinklers sputtered and went silent. I didn't smile this time. I just stood there, staring at the reflection of the dead lake, the one they ruined, and whispered, "Let's see how long you last without my water." To be continued. The HOA would soon realize what they'd done. The panic, the lawsuits, the exposure. That would come next. And when they came crawling back to me, begging for help, they'd finally understand the cost of their greed. Because I wasn't just some woman with a fishing rod. I was the owner of their only lifeline, HOA. Poisoned my lake to prevent me from fishing. Didn't know their water supply. Depends on it Part 2. Revenge floods back, the day. I turned that valve was the day silence fell over Lake Haven. The air felt different, heavy, tense, like the world was holding its breath. By sundown, The neighborhood that had once hummed with sprinklers and leaf blowers sounded like a ghost town. The next morning, I heard the first shouts. Across the lake, a man in a golf shirt was yelling at his hose. "There's no pressure!" A few houses down, a woman stepped out, holding a dripping shampoo bottle. The HOA lawns, so green they looked fake, were turning brown by the hour, and there I was, sitting on my porch with my coffee, watching it unfold. They'd poisoned my lake to keep me from fishing. Now, their million-dollar community was dying of thirst. The panic spreads by noon. The HOA group chat must have been on fire. SUVs came and went. People gathered by the clubhouse, waving their arms. I saw Karen Doyle, the queen herself, storm out of her house in that ridiculous pink suit, phone pressed to her ear. Her perfect hair was frizzing in the heat. She looked like a wilted tulip. She shouted something at Brad, the smug one, and he bolted toward the maintenance shed. Half an hour later, a plumber's truck arrived, then a second. They pulled open panels, checked gauges, banged on pipes. Nothing. The water wasn't coming back. My silent revenge. I didn't need to lift a finger. The Texas sun was doing the rest. By the second day, the HOA's ornamental pond, the one they'd bragged about being eco-friendly, had dried into a cracked bowl of mud. The koi fish floated belly up. By the third, local landscapers were walking off the job because there was no water for irrigation. On day 4, a delivery truck full of bottled water arrived for residents. Courtesy of the HOA, of course. They'd spend thousands just to keep people from revolting. Meanwhile, I sat at my kitchen table, maps and legal papers spread around, recording every news clip, every HOA notice, every social media meltdown. Revenge wasn't just sweet. It was strategic. The HOA tries to fight back. By the end of the week, I got a letter delivered by certified mail from Lake Haven, HOA, subject, unlawful tampering with community utility lines. They accused me of malicious interference with essential services. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Their water lines ran under my property. They were trespassing without an easement that met environmental code. In legal terms, they'd built their fancy little empire on my land's veins. I sent the letter straight to my attorney, Mark Delaney, a gruff no-nonsense Dallas lawyer who'd seen every kind of HOA nonsense there was. He skimmed it and said, "They're bluffing. Want me to hit them back?" "Hard," I said. He smiled. "You got it. The lawsuit that backfired." Within 48 hours, Mark filed a cease and desist order against the HOA for contamination, illegal utility use, and environmental destruction. Karen must have nearly choked on her latte when she got the notice, but instead of backing down, she did what every power-hungry HOA president does. She doubled down. They tried to sue me. The story hit the local paper. An homeowners association sues local woman over water dispute. What they didn't realize was that I'd already sent evidence to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, TCEQ, the EPA, and a reporter from California's environmental desk who loved stories about rich Californians ruining nature. Within days, the headlines flipped. California-based HOA accused of poisoning Dallas Lake to seize property. Karen's smile vanished from the neighborhood. The investigation, environmental officers came in wearing hazmat suits. They took samples, photographs, and drone footage. The smell of chemicals was still strong around the drainage points that led directly from the HOA's maintenance shed. One officer looked at me and said quietly, "Ma'am, Whoever did this didn't just poison your lake, they poisoned the aquifer. Exactly the same aquifer that fed every tap in Lake Haven. The report spread fast. Residents started demanding answers at HOA meetings. People shouted, accused, recorded videos for social media. Karen tried to blame me, said I tainted the ecosystem to extort the HOA, but then the TCEQ report dropped. It proved the contamination came from the HOA's side. Their illegal chemical runoff had bled straight into the water, their own water source. The breaking point, the HOA's luxury homes became nightmares overnight. Faucets spewed brown water that smelled of metal. Families packed up and moved out. Realtors pulled listings. Property values plummeted 40% in a month. Karen's empire was collapsing. I watched the news from my living room couch, calm as a saint, while she stood on camera in her pink suit, stammering about isolated incidents. Brad and Tyler had already lawyered up and started pointing fingers at her. The community turned on the board. Angry residents vandalized the HOA office, spray painting poisoners across the windows. That's when Karen made the biggest mistake of all. She came to my property again. The confrontation. I heard the crunch of her Mercedes tires on my gravel drive. She stepped out, heels sinking in the dirt, clutching a folder. Her lipstick was cracked, hair tangled, eyes wild. Ava, she said, voice trembling, but still trying to sound commanding. We need to talk. I folded my arms. About your dying lake or your dying lawsuits. She flinched. You have to turn the water back on. Families need it. Kids! Kids! I interrupted, stepping closer. You didn't think about kids when you dumped poison into this lake. Her voice rose. I didn't know it would spread. We were trying to keep you from... She stopped herself. From what? Fishing, I hissed. You killed everything that lived here. You ruined my peace. You buried my cat with your chemicals. Her hands shook. We'll compensate you. We'll fix it. Just turn the water back on. I stared into her eyes for a long moment. You think money erases what you did? Then I leaned closer and whispered, you wanted control. Karen, now you can live without it. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, red-faced and defeated. The collapse within weeks. The HOA board disbanded under pressure. The EPA fined them $2.6 million for environmental violations. The city revoked their development license. Karen Doyle was charged with reckless endangerment and tampering with water systems. Brad and Tyler cut plea deals and testified against her. When the trial came, I sat quietly in the courtroom, wearing the same worn denim jacket I'd always loved. Karen avoided my gaze, but when the prosecutor read out the charges, she finally looked up, and I smiled. They sentenced her to 3 years of probation and community service, cleaning polluted waterways. Poetic justice. Ava's Lake Reborn. Restoring the lake took months. The environmental cleanup team drained what remained, filtered the sediment, and aerated the basin. New fish were introduced, and fresh reeds planted along the shore. The first morning I saw the water shimmer blue again, I felt something unclench inside me. The birds came back. The air smelled clean. Neighbors, the few who stayed, avoided me for a while, ashamed of how they'd believed the HOA's lies. But one by one, they came by, thanked me for standing up, for fighting. The lake wasn't just mine anymore. It was proof that people like Karen could be beaten. The offer a few months later, a developer from Los Angeles contacted me. He wanted to buy the land, all of it, for 10 times what I'd paid. He said he was planning a new project. Environmentally conscious luxury homes. I laughed into the phone. You people never learn. Then I hung up. Instead, I turned the property into a wildlife reserve. Partnered with a Dallas university to study water ecosystems. They named it Morgan Lake Sanctuary. Every morning, students now come to test the water. Clean, fresh, alive. And at the center of it all stands a wooden sign I carved myself. Respect the water. It remembers. The final visit 1 year later, I was sitting by the lake when a familiar car pulled up. Old, rusty, but unmistakable. Karen. She'd aged a decade in 1 year. No makeup, no suit, just a plain shirt and worn jeans. She walked up slowly, eyes down. I wanted to apologize, she said softly. I said nothing. I lost everything, she continued. The board, the house, the job. You were right. We destroyed something good. The wind rippled across the lake's surface, scattering the reflection of her face. I finally spoke. You didn't just destroy the lake, Karen. You destroyed your own people's trust. That's worse. She nodded, tears glinting in the sunlight. I know. I clean rivers now. Court ordered. But it helps. She looked up at me one last time. You ever forgive me? I stared out at the water, then back at her. I already did, but the lake, it hasn't. She nodded again and left. I watched her car disappear down the dirt road. Peace returns. The lake was quiet again. The cypress trees swayed gently, and somewhere a heron lifted off, its wings catching the morning light. I cast my line into the clear blue water. The ripples spread wide, gentle, alive. For the first time in a long time, I smiled. Not with vengeance, but peace. Because in the end, revenge wasn't about rage. It was about balance, and balance had finally been restored. Epilogue. Whispers from LA months later. I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single line, typed in bold, Lake Haven HOA dissolved. Karen Doyle declared bankruptcy. Brad and Tyler banned from any future development projects in California. I folded the paper and slipped it into a drawer with the lab reports, the maps, the old fishing photos. Then I walked outside to the lake, breathed in the fresh air and whispered. They thought they could poison my peace, but peace can fight back. The water rippled gently, as if answering, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. A Texas storm brewing again, ready to wash away the last traces of poison from this world. The storm. After the silent summer turned to fall, and Dallas finally got rain again. Hard, cleansing rain that drummed against the rooftop like a heartbeat. I stood by the window, watching the raindrops ripple across the surface of my lake. For months, the water had been calm, still, healing. But tonight, under the storm's roar, it felt alive again. Lightning flashed across the sky, and for a moment, I saw my reflection. Older, stronger, and finally at peace. But while nature was forgiving, the world beyond my fences was not. The HOA's public humiliation, the story of Lake Haven's poison lake, had gone viral. News stations from Los Angeles to New York covered it. Clips of Karen's tearful apologies, satellite shots of the poisoned aquifer, interviews with me, standing beside my revived lake. I didn't ask for fame, but I wasn't hiding from it either. One reporter from ABC Dallas asked, Ms. Morgan, if you could say one thing to the HOA that started all this, what would it be? I looked straight at the camera and said, you can build houses, but you can't buy respect. You can own land, but not the water that flows through it, or the people who protect it. The clip hit 5 million views in a week. The HOA board members, who hadn't already resigned, were forced out by furious residents. Their names flooded online forums, shamed, blacklisted, and banned from any future HOA positions in the state of Texas. Karen's pink-suited arrogance became a meme. People called her the lady who poisoned paradise. Her real estate license was revoked in California. Her company dissolved. It was over for her. Ava's justice. The court finally issued a ruling. Lake Haven HOA owed $4.8 million in cleanup, damages, and legal restitution. Mark, my lawyer, grinned when the judge read the verdict. "That's what happens when greed meets Texas soil," he whispered. "Most of that money went straight into restoring the land, but I used a part of it to build a wooden dock at the far end of the lake. The same spot where Willow, my cat, used to nap. I named it Willow's Rest. I'd sit there in the evenings, watching the sunset bleed across the horizon, and think about how everything, the anger, the loss, the fire inside me, had led to this peace." Karen's final reckoning. A few months after the cleanup was declared complete, I got another visitor. This time, it wasn't Karen. It was a young man, maybe early 20s, wearing work gloves and a volunteer badge. He said he was part of a California cleanup program for polluted rivers.